I would say that the Italian commercial cinema is very much a give the people what they want kind of cinema.
There's always an interest in supplying movies that there are demand for. Let's say from 1977 to 82, you got Star Wars, Alien, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Conan the Barbarian, Road Warrior. Right there, you have enough genres for the Italian film industry to just run with for the next 10 years.
Clearly, Italy has spawned more than a few truly great artists among the filmmakers. But for every Antonioni or Fellini, there are a whole bunch of working directors who are the first to tell you, everybody, they love the Westerns, I'm going to be making Westerns. You know, everybody, they love these gialli, I'm going to make some gialli.
So when you get a big film that's, especially an American movie, that's a huge hit worldwide, something like Jaws, then yeah, people are going to be lining up to do their own version.
The Italian film industry has always been ruled by what they call the law of the filone, and a filone is a stream. So the idea is that all you need is one picture to make money, and there will be a whole stream of pictures just like that will come right after them.
But within some genres, like the spaghetti western, you end up having Italian filmmakers imitating other Italian filmmakers. Django by Sergio Corbucci is such a big hit that other Italian filmmakers start making their own Django movies, and movies that aren't necessarily Django movies get retitled as Django movies.
It's a very nimble industry even now. So in the time that it would take Hollywood to make one, say, Alien knockoff, you know, the Italians could have made 10 of them and have them in theaters. And, oddly enough, almost all of them would make money. And so it's why when you look at the history of Italian films, particularly starting in the 60s, when that kind of rule really fell into place, you'll see dozens and dozens and dozens of films in one genre suddenly made in a period of 4 years. And then they'll stop because that Fellini will have run dry and they'll just start making something else. You know, Jaws was one of the great rip-offable films for the Italians. First of all, because it didn't have to be a shark. You could make tentacles. You could make killer whales. You could make, you know, the giant white shark. You could make the little sharks. And it often turned into a really, really silly kind of monster movie.
He's gonna be over 8 meters long!
You'll get plenty in the United States that are influenced by Jaws, something like Piranha, which is a humorous take on it. Barracuda. There was also there was one made in Mexico called Tintorera, and just on and on. And you know, the Italians certainly came in with most notably The Last Shark, which played in the United States as Great White. But then you also had Lamberto Bava's movie a couple of years after that called Monster Shark, also known as Devilfish. And then there was Killer Fish by Antonio Margheriti, which had kind of an exciting B-level cast and cast of TV favorites like Lee Majors and Karen Black and Frank Pesce, whose last name is Fish in Italian.
The most blatant of the rip-offs, which is to say a film that was virtually a copy of Jaws, was Great White, which was an Enzo Castellari movie, and that pretty much remade Jaws, scene by scene, shot for shot, which is, I guess, a very efficient way of doing it.
The way it was released in the United States, I think, was what really got it in trouble. That it was advertised pretty much the same way that Jaws was. I mean, Jaws had a Shark Facts poster. Great White had a Great White Facts poster that listed all this information about sharks. They got Percy Rodriguez to narrate the trailer for Jaws, Universal did, and Film Ventures got Percy Rodriguez, or somebody who sounded just like him. I don't know if he ever admitted to this.
Nature's perfect killing machine, the Great White Shark. Great White, rated PG.
and they have the same warning at the bottom of the poster. Some scenes may be too intense for younger viewers. It was advertised pretty much the same way, and I believe James Franciscus's character in the movie has a name similar to Peter Benchley, who wrote the original novel. I believe he's a writer named Peter Bentley or Benton. I don't remember, but it's close enough.
And, Universal did sue.
They pulled Great White right out of the theater, and they have a long memory, Universal, because about 5 or 6 years ago there was a screening of Great White advertised. It was going to be an Enzo Castellari double bill of Inglourious Bastards and Great White, and the theater showing the double feature got a cease and desist from Universal, so no screening of Great White.
It's my shark rod. It has to be.
The hell it is! There are bodies out there, and more to come if we don't end this
Because
thing.
basically Italian casting directors were the master of, that guy just fell off the A-list, but he's still got a mortgage to pay. So I bet that he will do this outer space movie, this Western, this alien knockoff, whatever it is we're doing, I bet he'll do it. And you know what? He's still a Hollywood actor, so we can put his name on the marquee, and people won't think, oh my God, this is one of those crappy European films.
The filmmakers there would try to make the movie seem like it was shot entirely in the United States. A lot of times, all the exteriors were, like something like 1990, The Bronx Warriors. They filmed a lot in New York, in Manhattan, as well as in the Bronx. But all the interiors were shot in Rome.
So Italian actors got name changes, and wherever possible, you would have at least one American name actor.
The Cannibal Apocalypse was shot in Atlanta. The Beyond was shot partly in Louisiana. Hands of Steel was shot in Arizona.
In fact, a lot of people from television got cast in these movies because it was kind of a win for everybody. The guys and girls who were television actors got the chance to be in a feature film. And as late as the 70s and 80s, films had a cachet that television didn't. So people who felt that they were being typecast as television actors would often take almost any opportunity to make a feature film, even if it was taking a secondary part in an American picture or taking a leading part in a foreign picture, because it meant that their name was going to go up on a movie screen. So they were movie actors, and they felt that it might help them to get larger roles in American films.
A lot of American actors would turn up in these Italian films over and over. People like John Saxon, Henry Silva, Fred Williamson.
Fred Williamson, who was very much trapped in the ghetto of blaxploitation movies in America, got to make all kinds of movies in Europe. I mean, it's not that they didn't notice he was black. It's just that it wasn't as big a deal to them. Race was a different kind of issue to them from what it was in the United States. And so, he could get the white girl, he could kill all the white guys, he had an opportunity actually to get much larger and probably in some ways more satisfying film roles than were available to him in America. And for Italian producers, he was Fred Williamson. He was great. He was a great get for them.
Then you would get some British actors like David Warbeck, who did a couple of movies with Lucio Fulci, did a lot with Antonio Margheriti. They even went and got Sean Connery's brother to be in one of them for a movie called Operation Kid Brother.
They often had Klaus Kinski in them, and that was true of the Italian cash-ins of everything.
If you couldn't get David Warbeck, you'd get Ian McCallum, who is in Contamination and was also in Zombie, which was a Dawn of the Dead influenced, George Romero wannabe film.
Alien was a big money-making movie, and no two ways about it. And even here in New York, where most of those movies didn't play, there was a period of about a year and a half where every time you turned around, there was Creature or some other alien knockoff showing, or Galaxy of Terror.
When Contamination was released in the United States, it was retitled Alien Contamination, and was released by Canon. And they ended up forming a relationship with Luigi Cozzi.
The thing I remember most about it was the egg scene in that, which was, how should we say, not as terrifying as the egg scene in Alien.
I just have a hard time thinking of Contamination as an Alien ripoff, since it's not set in outer space, and you don't have this big egg. You have little eggs in a warehouse. I mean, it's like Costco contamination.
The science fiction knockoffs tended not to ring a lot of changes on the original movies. I mean, there were a lot of Star Wars knockoffs that had none of what Star Wars had that actually made people like Star Wars, which was the special effects and the reasonably good actors and, you know, the planet scenes and the bar scene with the, they didn't have any of that stuff.
Luigi Cozzi, the director of Contamination, made a movie called Star Crash that was influenced by Star Wars. And, you know, you had an attempt, let's say, at doing some of the same special effects with spaceships. But you also had some interesting things going on with stop motion. And so it almost looks like that Cozzi was also trying to do the Ray Harryhausen films, which were still being made at that time, with Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, and a couple of years before that, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. You get this interesting mixture of genres here and references.
Star Crash is fun, partly because it is funny, and it's not funny because it's inept. It has a sense of humor about the preposterousness of the idea, basically, of making a Western in space and then pretending that it's a science fiction movie, which it's not. It's also got some very pretty girls and not very many clothes, like outer space astronaut girls wearing these outfits. You look at them and you think, so you must have gone to some space academy someplace, right? Did you wear that when you were in school? Was that a uniform, basically? Did they issue you a little bikini and buckle up the front boots just to get you ready and to kind of psych you for what it was going to be like to wear those uniforms?
At the beginning of the 21st century, the nuclear holocaust had come to pass, and civilization vanished. It was a time of chaos and violence, until one day there appeared
the post-nuke genre, when they would take either Road Warrior or Escape from New York, elements from these films, and just over and over again do different variations. So you get 1990, The Bronx Warriors, Escape from the Bronx, Warriors of the Wasteland.
And I think part of the appeal of those movies, first, was that after Mad Max, and particularly Road Warrior, because that was a much bigger hit worldwide than Mad Max was, they had a real box office appeal. People clearly liked the kind of gladiatorial combat aspect to those movies. But also, they were pretty cheap.
You had a movie called Rush, and then another movie called Rage. After the fall of New York, there was a whole string of these films.
You didn't have to spend a lot of money on costumes because people were always dressed in rags in these movies. All you had to do was buy a shirt for the guys and get a girl something that she could tie up underneath her boobs, and that was fine. Because all you had to do was go up to the South Bronx. And, you know, you had buildings that had been burned to the ground, you had empty lots. You had debris all over the street. It was the best special effect and set design that nobody had to buy.
Another one is Lucio Fulci's film, The New Gladiators, which was made in 1984 and was released in the United States on video in December of '87, just a month after The Running Man came out. Now, a lot of people, when they saw The New Gladiator sitting on the video shelves, thought, oh, wow, they were very fast in getting a Running Man ripoff out there. But, you know, it was made 3 years before The Running Man, and a year or two after the Stephen King novel, The Running Man. But the interesting thing about it is that it's actually based more on the Robert Sheckley short stories, The Prize of Peril, and also The Seventh Victim, which became The 10th Victim, the 1966 film with Marcello Mastroianni and Ursula Andress. So there are a lot of elements from Robert Sheckley ended up in the Stephen King novel, The Running Man, and then ended up in The New Gladiators.
They had a real old Western, but really rough Western quality to them, because they're all ultimately about the war between civilization and the wilderness. So you always have roving bands of savages, and then you have people who are trying to rebuild some semblance of the society that we had before, one where people don't automatically rape and murder each other, but rather try to work together to build some kind of communal existence. It's a very compelling story, and it is relatively inexpensive to make. And then if you wanted to spend a little extra money, you could have some mutant monsters or something, you know, some shambling creatures or some people who had gone mad and become the cannibal tribe or something.
One of the most interesting post-nuke movies, I think, is After the Fall of New York, because on the surface it's another Escape from New York ripoff, but I mean, there's at least one plot idea that predicts Children of Men, the P.D. James novel, and later the film with Clive Owen and Michael Caine.
On an audience level, those movies actually played to two completely different audiences. They played to people from the cities who recognized, you know, echoes of urban unrest, of which there was a great deal in the 70s and 80s. There was a lot of class warfare of one kind or another. There was a lot of fear of bad neighborhoods and the kind of people who lived in them. And then they played to people who thought the cities were all Sodom and Gomorrah on the nearest river, the Hudson being the first one that anybody ever thought of. And so it played to a fantasy version of the worst things that they thought about cities, and they just got a big kick out of that. It's like, yeah, that's how those city people are. You know, they're running around on their motorcycles and setting people on fire, and it's just one big free-for-all, because that's what goes on in the cities.
Something like Warriors of the Wasteland, the Enzo Castellari film. I mean, he probably noticed in Mad Max that there was a rape scene in Mad Max where a young couple are both assaulted by this roving motorcycle gang. So in the Castellari movie, they decided to make the villains all homosexuals, and at one point they rape the Mad Max stand-in, played by Timothy Brent, which, you know, I don't think anybody was expecting that. And that's something you definitely wouldn't encounter in most American films. They knew they couldn't get the effects or the performers in the films that they were imitating. They couldn't get that same level of quality. So they would make up for it in other areas, usually outrageous behavior.
Boobs and blood, cheapest effects ever.